What's going on, everyone? This is Emerald Knight Leon back with another deck analysis. EX3 is finally coming upon us. It's going to be hitting this Friday, and at that same time we're also getting a lot of restrictions on certain decks such as Crossheart. I've mentioned it before and I'll mention it again. Crossheart isn't going to be competitively viable unless you're really wanting to try some spicy tech. And it's not going to be viable until BT11 when we're getting more Shoutmon support. But we're not here to talk about Shoutmon. We're here to talk about a travesty that I feel Bandai has done. And that is Justimon and their handling of it. Justimon got a lot of good support to start off with in BT and in EX2. And then he didn't get anything else. Until recently, where we get Justimon Critical Arm for BT10. And that's great and all, but we're not going to get anything else Justimon related until BT11 or 12. And that just does not feel good. Like, we have a pretty good deck that's decently casual for people, especially with a lot of cards like Tsunarizamon is now slowly making its way back down, and it's actually a bit easier to find with the gift boxes for 2022 for the EX3 stuff. Mind you, you do have a 1 in 4 chance of getting one of the other cards, but oh well. But honestly, this is a deck that I actually had a bit of fun trying to come up with a decent way of making it slight competitively, but still pretty casual. So to start with, we're running 5 Digi-Eggs, 3 Hopmons, and 2 Pagumons. Now these ratios can be changed any way you want. If you wanted to go and lean more towards the Pagumon, that's great. I personally like the Hopmon because that is an extra 1,000 that we are giving to our Justimon, especially because by the time we do get into our Justimon, we're gonna have at least a Rio in play. Preferably, we want to at least have a Rio and maybe a Kazu in play. And at peak efficiency, we want to have an Izzy, a Rio, and a Kazu. And that's why we're running 8 Tamers, is to give us options here. Rio, though, is a Tamer that needs to be run at 3 to 4, really. But, yeah, moving into our level 3s, we are running a slight weird ratio here. We're running 4 copies of Toy Agumon, 4 copies of Monodramon, 2 copies of Tsunarizamon, and 3 copies of Chikurimon. Now, I recently was able to get my hands on a 3rd Tsunariza through the gift boxes, so if I wanted to, I could change the ratios to 2 Chikuris, 3 Tsunarizas, but I feel like in the event that you are against a Digicrossing deck or a deck that runs Death X, having the 3 Chikuris is very useful. But talking about Toyagu is kind of the backbone of this deck. He has Reboot, and it's essentially what we want to see in our Justimon sources. The reason for that is that some of our key level 4 here does have an inherited that basically does need a Reboot attached to it. Now, there are other ways of getting Reboot. We could be running Defense Plug-in C, but that is a 5 cost, so it's not always going to be viable. There are some other cards you could use instead, and we'll talk about that later. But ideally, the reason we are using Plug-in C is because of its main effect, but also its security effect. Moving into our other Digimon, we're running 4 copies of Monodramon. This is an excellent card to have at the start of the game. You just hard play it, search for your Tamers because you need your Tamers. And you can add all of the black Tamers to your hand. So that means if you were to reveal 4 cards and 3 of them were Tamers, those 3 are just going straight into your hand, and then you could just hard play something else if you went second. Our Tsunarizamon is more in line with this deck, especially because we want to see our Justimon getting multiple checks each hit. Because we need a lot of Tamers in play, we can use its effect to unsuspend it, so that we can get, ideally, 4 possible security checks going right then and there. Chikurimon, again, I mentioned Chikurimon earlier. Players can't reduce play costs. We don't have to worry about that with this deck, but players that are using Digi-Crossing decks or Death X, they're going to have trouble with that. They're going to have to spend resources in order to take care of the Chikuri ideally. Blue Flare does have a means of doing so in the form of Jellymon from BT9, but Crossheart does not really have a means of doing this outside of, say, a Sunrise Buster, which is getting reduced to 1, but they do have a Pyrosphere or Fireball if you're doing the Japanese dub. As for our level 4s, we are running 4 copies of BT2 Greymon. This is an excellent Greymon because we are relying on the reboot from Toy Agumon. This is going to give our Justimon jamming. So even if our Justimon is lacking in DP at times, as if we have this Greymon under it, it's going to be perfectly fine against Digimon. Strike-Dramon is a nice card as well, but if you don't have 2 Tamers in play, it's not ideal, and we'll talk about that. But we are running 2 Grumblemons. Grumblemon is just here because it can be the means to win, really. If we're going to get 4 checks off of our Justimon, and maybe an extra check off of one of our other Digimon, then Grumblemon is basically the final piece of the puzzle. Strike-Dramon has a when Digivolving that lets us add 1 Black Tamer from the top 4 cards of our deck. We don't need to worry about that, really. We don't. What we do like is it's inherited, though. It is a once per turn when attacking inherited, but if you have 2 or more Black Tamers in play, you gain a memory. That's very nice. It can ideally get you the memory you need to go into Grumble for game, which is also great. Now, our level 5s. Some people are probably going to question me on this. Why are we running BT10 Gogmamon? Well, there is a reason. It's a 5 cost to play. And it's 8,000 DP. Let's say, hypothetical situation, you brick really bad in your first game. But you do have a Gogmamon in hand. And you are going second. Your opponent left you at 3 memory. They don't have a memory fixer yet. So if you wanted, you could just slap down Gogmamon right now and put them to 2. And then the next turn, you could go into a Justimon. Or, next turn, you could just swing into their security and you might have a decent chance of surviving. The Gogmamon is a low-cost Digimon that can essentially help us work our way into a Justimon to counteract a brick tan. Essentially. It's for the same reason that when we're covering cards you could tech in, the Warumanzemon is another card that you could use. I just personally like the Gogma because it's 8,000 DP compared to Warumanze's 6,000. For our other level 5 though, we are running 4 copies of Cyberdramon. Now, coming EX3, we could theoretically run the EX3 Cyberdramon. That is a 6 cost to play, 3 cost to Evo, and it does have an inherited where, while you have a suspended Tamer in play, this Digimon gets plus 2,000 DP. Now that is nice, especially because 2 of our Tamers essentially can suspend here, being Rio and Kazu. So, Rio already lets us suspend to get 1,000, so ideally that could net us 3,000. But considering we are running a lot of jamming with this deck, it's not always going to be needed, really. The Cyberdramon also does have a very nice effect. When Digivolving, you can play a Rio Akiyama from your hand without paying its cost. So if you don't have a Rio, or you have a Rio but you haven't been able to get your Justimon yet, you can slap down the second Rio in order to search your deck for Justimon, and in order to end your turn by going into Justy. Or if you have enough resources that you can use, you can just go into Justy that one turn. and go for a swing. Its inherited is nothing to sneeze at either. If you have 2 or more black tamers in play, de-digivolve one of your opponent's Digimon. This is going to be a thing when you attack. It is a once per turn because otherwise that would be broken. But that de-digivolving is great when it counts. Especially if, say, you're going against a Crossheart deck and they leave you with an X5 to deal with. You can just de-digivolve that X5 and now they no longer have a blocker. Now, for our level 6s, we are running 3 copies of both Justimons. So let's talk about Blitzarm first. Blitzarm was from EX2. Why they didn't introduce just the regular Justimon first, I don't know. I really don't. But Blitzarm is the backbone of this deck. You ideally want to go into him first, or you want to go into him last. When Digivolving, activate one of the effects below. This Digimon gets plus 2000 DP for the turn. Or unsuspend this Digimon. Or delete one of your opponent's Digimon with a play cost of 5 or less. Here's the thing. There's only 2 really that matter, and that's the first 2. Ideally, when you're doing your when attacking once per turn, for each tamer you have in play, activate this Digimon's when Digivolving effect, you're going to want to be hitting, say, 2 of the plus 2000s, 1 of the unsuspend Digimon, and if you have a 4th tamer, go for the deleting if they have something you can delete. But you want to get the plus 2000 because in the event that you don't have the jamming, you want to be able to swing over everything that can really hinder you. So, given that it is at 11,000, with the Hopmon, that could be 12,000. With the Rio, that could be 13. And then we could possibly get ourselves to 17, allowing us to swing over practically everything that could hurt us. Things like Justimon GX, things like Death X, things like, for some reason, who knows if someone has a Susanoo Oman in their security. We just want to make sure that we can swing over things. Now, moving into our other Justimon, we have Critical Arm. This digivolves for 1 off of Justimon. Now, when digivolving, by returning 1 card with Justimon in its name other than Critical Arm from this Digimon's Digivolution cards to your hand, delete one of your opponent's Digimon with a play cost of 9 or less. When attacking, if you have a tamer in play, this Digimon may digivolve into a Digimon card with Justimon in its name other than Critical Arm from your hand, ignoring its Digivolution requirements by paying 2. So, how this tech is going to work. You go into Blitz first. Then you go into Critical. You send Blitz back to your hand, but in order to delete something that's a 9 cost or less. And then you go and attack and digivolve back into Blitz to get more things going. So ideally, like how this interaction could go about. You go into Blitz. You swing, use its effect to unsuspend this Digimon, plus 2000s, the whole shebang. You digivolve into Critical Arm. Critical Arm is still going to get, ideally, the plus 2000 or the 4000, depending on how many tamers you have. And it's going to be coming into play unsuspended. You then use its effect when digivolving to return Blitz back to your hand. And then you're going to go back into Blitz when you attack with Critical, so that you can then activate its unsuspending again. Now, moving on to our options. We are running 7 options here, and there is room for mixing around ratios. This is ideally what I started off with, and that was 3 defense plug-in Cs, 4 justice kicks. Defense plug-in C, as long as we have a tamer, we can use it without meeting its color requirements. We don't need to worry about that because we are just running all mono black. Until the end of your opponent's turn, one of your Digimon gains blocker and reboot, and can't be deleted by your opponent's effects. It has an inherited as well, or not inherited, security. Sorry. Reveal the top 3 cards of your deck. You may play 1 Digimon card with a play cost of 4 or less among them without paying its play cost. Place the rest at the bottom of your deck in any order, and then add this card to your hand. So you will be able to play everything from your Greymon down to your Toy Agu. Everything else you cannot play though. But that is why we are also running the Greymon here. Is just so that if it does come out of security, we can get a champion in right then and there, so we can work our way into our Justimon. And then ideally, if we have the memory, we can then use plugin C in order to give ourselves Reboot so we can get jamming. Now, Justice Kick is the reason we need 8 Tamers here. It's a 12 cost to play, and unfortunately, its reducing of its cost is only by 1 for each Tamer you have in play. Now, there are ways of working around this. You could run a 2-cost Purple Mimi, which would let you suspend it to gain a memory, so you can kind of further reduce its cost. But the problem is unless you draw into that Mimi, you're not going to be able to search it out. The only other way you could get it in play is essentially through security. But this card has a very useful effect though. You may play 1 Digimon card with Justimon in its name from your hand without paying its play cost. If you do, delete one of your opponent's Digimon with a play cost less than or equal to the Digimon you played. That means, depending on which Justimon you could play, you will either be able to delete 11 cost or less, or a 12 cost or less. Its security effect is also nice in that you may play 1 Black Tamer card from your hand without paying its cost, and then add this to your hand. So if it gets hit in security, you can play an Izzy, and essentially get put your opponent to less memory through its effects, since we're all running, everything is black. You could play a Rio and essentially search out for your other Justimons or Dramon. Or you could play Kazu, and if you already have a Cyborg in play, you can essentially gain extra memory at the start of your next turn. There are ways of going about this, and Justice Kick I feel is a good card to have at the very least at 3, because you want to be able to see it, and its security effect is very nice. For our Tamers, as I've mentioned, we are running 2 copies of Izzy. Izzy reveals the top 3 cards of her deck. If they're all black, we gain a memory, and then place them at the top of the deck in any order. It's a memory fixer, so it's going to set ourselves to 3, regardless of things, which is always nice. Rio searches for Justimon and Dramons. So that means we can search for our Monodramon, our Strike Dramon, our Cyber Dramon, and our Justimons. We can't search for the other stuff, which is a shame, but that's fine. When you attack with a black Digimon, you may suspend this Tamer to have that Digimon get plus 1000 DP until the end of your opponent's turn. It's not a lot, but it can turn the tide, essentially. You could try running a much more blocker variant version of this deck, and that 1000, if you're able to also attach a Reboot through either Defense Plugin C or one of the options that I'll talk about in cards you could tech in, that could work. And Kazu is a staple in D Brigade, and it's a great card here. If you have a Cyborg Digimon or Machine Digimon in play at the start of your turn, you gain a memory. And then when one of your Digimon with Cyborg or Machine becomes suspended, you can suspend this Tamer to draw 1. And that is an all-turn. Caveat, though, is you do have to trash 1 card from your hand. But that's fine, really, honestly. Now, that is the deck, but there are cards you could tech in, and quite a few, actually. I mentioned Mimi, but another color tech, if you wanted to try to cover all of your bases, is actually 2-cost Tai Kamiya. Not only will it give all of your Digimon plus 1000 during your turn, but it will let you run a card like Delicate Plan, essentially making your Justimon immortal, because it's not only going to have jamming, it's going to swing over everything regardless of whether it has jamming or not, and it won't activate security option cards. Now, if you're running a more blocker-oriented version, I would recommend Tumblemon here. I would also recommend the Kapurimon, but I feel Tumblemon is better because it's for your opponent's turn. If you're also doing this, I do recommend running the Megadramon from Starter Deck 5 because its inherited just gives you blocker. For level 3s, you can run Chumon to prevent your opponent from using delay effects to gain memory or gaining memory off of Digimon's inheritance. Chikurimon is a good bomb in your security. It will essentially just de-digivolve one of your opponent's Digimon. It can, however, backfire sometimes. There have been incidences where my opponent will swing into my last security with his only Digimon. It de-digivolves it, and then he goes into something that can unsuspend and blitz. Great job, Chikurimon. That doesn't happen all the time, but it has happened enough to me to be a little wary of it. Kokuwamon is also a good card because it can prevent players from ignoring Digivolution requirements. So that's also a nice card. Now, for level 4s, there are 3 that kind of, I feel, work. Mechanori, just because it's a 6,000 blocker that can unsuspend indefinitely as long as it survives. If you're not able to get your hands on the Greymon, Black Galgamon can work just as well because it has the exact same inheritable effect. And then there's Kurisarimon from BT2. And the reason I say this is that you can make a very interesting argument that this card can help lower the cost of Justice Kick. The reason it does this is it's inherited of when you play another Digimon with the same name as this Digimon, gain 1 memory. So since this is going to obviously be under a Justimon, if you play Justice Kick while having another Justimon in play, you can theoretically gain a memory as long as that Justimon is the same one that you have in play. So if you have a Blitz arm in play, you have to play another Blitz arm. Or if it's a critical arm, you have to play another critical arm. Just because of the wording, it has to have the exact same name. For level 5s, I did mention Waremonzemon. It is a 5 cost to play, but it is a 6,000 DP, so it's not going to be able to always swing over everything early on. Metal Greymon, if you want to go for more security checks, just because of the reboot, is an option. And the same can also be said for Volcanomon, as if your opponent has an unsuspended Digimon in play, this gains security attack +1. For option cards, as I mentioned, ADP is an option, but we also have Black Memory Boost, just for searching, Congo for stalling out some things, Iron Fisted Onslaught, you know I love Ultimate Flare, but the other card that can replace Defense Plugin C is Final Zubagon Punch. So specifically, this needs to happen. This needs to be played when either to pass turn or if you're able to be at 5 memory. And that's because you go into your Justimon for 3, you're at 2. It's when Digivolving Effect activates, you pick the +2000. So ideally, it's going to be at either 13 or 14. You're going to get Final Zubagon Punch. It's a +3000, so you're at 16 or 17. Because you're at 16 DP or 1000 DP or more, you're going to gain Blocker, Reboot, and Security Attack +1 until the end of your opponent's next turn. So that is another way of giving your Justimon Blocker and or Reboot, depending on what style you're playing. That is it for this analysis, though. In my testing of Justimon, I actually did enjoy it. It is a fun deck to play. It's not stressful, really. There is some strategy to it, honestly, and I do enjoy that. But it doesn't feel as stressful as some other decks where you need to have the right hand. There are ways of working around it. I basically put in Gogma just in case I brick, because, you know, that's always a possibility. But overall, it's not a stressful deck to play. It's not really that hard to pilot, and it can be enjoyable, really. You know, you're always going to hit your tamers. They're either going to be in your deck or in your security, or ideally already in your hand. So you don't have to search too hard because you're probably going to hit something eventually. Really, it's just getting the momentum going, because once you get the momentum into your Justimon and just start going to town on your opponent's security, it becomes hard for them to really hit back. Especially if they don't have a lot of option cards that will, you know, curb your field, essentially. But again, that is it for this deck analysis. Leave a like, comment, subscribe. Tell me what you think about this deck. What would you play differently? Bandai, can we please get more Justimon support? You're giving us just like 1 to 2 Justimon cards every other set lately, and I don't appreciate it. I really don't. We're getting Gallantmon stuff. We're getting, you know, more. We're getting Gallantmon stuff for this set, EX3, and BT12. Marcus is getting more support in BT12. So is Ty Davis. Like, everything is getting more support except for good old Rio. Come on, this guy went through so much in his games. Like, he needs some more love. He really does need some more love. And Bandai, while you're at it, can you please make Marcus's sister a Tamer card so we can have more Biomon support? I'd very much appreciate it. I will see you all in the next video. Peace.